what is it like to be negotiating the letter of intent?
You know, David, I don't know what your view is on it per se, but in my view, this is probably one of the most critical junctures of the entire transaction process because this is really where the two business, the business owner and the business seller, or the business buyer and the business seller, are talking about business related items. And the more items that you can define in that letter of intent right out of the gate, the smoother the process goes. So we're talking about things, it's not just purchase price, it's how you're funding the purchase price, it's real estate, it's post-closing transition services, it's what kind of equipment's being purchased, it's who are the key employees, like all of these things that you're doing in due diligence. Anything that's a question mark should be hammered out in that letter of intent. And remember, they're not binding, so you're not signing your life away when you execute one of these things. What you're doing is setting the framework for how that transaction is going to go.
I completely agree, James. I think you said it very, very well. I think a lot of people think it's a legal document and it's really not that important in terms of capturing all the business points. I look at it differently. I look at it as it's a business document, and it absolutely is essential to nailing all the detailed specifics of the transaction, as you said. And you really need to be communicating the key business points of the deal in that letter of intent on the front end. And it really needs to be expansive enough so that in the middle of the deal, things aren't resetting the deal so there's major deal points kind of jumping in to the purchase agreement in the last hour. It really needs to be very ventilated. It needs to be very specific and transparent on the front end. And you really need to look at what the value drivers of the business. Is it an employee? Is it a customer contract? Is it getting a consent of an assignment? Is it making sure that the seller note that the seller is going to hold, that he understands that it's subordinated to the loan that you're bringing in? These are sound like little detailed things, but these are the types of things that should be in the letter of intent.
Yeah.
And I think the big fatal error that a lot of buyers make, particularly founders, is that sometimes they accept an LOI that's proposed to them by the seller or seller's counsel. I don't know how you think about that, but to me, when you accept that, you're just sort of like, you're kind of, throwing it over the wall and just kind of, mailing it in for the rest of the process, and you're going to have problems.
I completely agree that the sooner that we get involved on, because we typically do buy side deals, the sooner that we can be involved, in my mind, the more control we're going to have over the process. But I also think that we're also going to get those key terms hammered out over time. When I talk to clients about her considering a transaction, the letter of intent, if it's done right, really reflects the quality of your due diligence leading into it, and it's really the first indication of trust between you as the buyer and the seller on the other side, or the reverse. Once you get those nailed out or nailed down, in my mind, it's just really more of a conversation amongst the professional advisors, just confirming details as you move forward. But if it's just a generic, this is the purchase price, and we're going to buy a couple vehicles, and we're going to move forward, you are destined to have a very long process that ultimately may fail.
Completely agreed. And the reason to be extra preparatory upfront with the letter of intent is because ultimately you're going to have to bring it to your lender, and your lender is going to want to see it. And you just want it to go from the business agreement on the front end into the LOI, and then, as you said, confirming it through the due diligence process, and then into the stock purchase agreement or the asset purchase agreement with no major changes.
Yes.
So it needs to be comprehensive enough on the front end so that you're getting all the key points in it. Because if you're adding a lot to it, then the lender might ask a few questions about this point or that point, and that's when they might get a little wobbly in terms of wanting to fund the deal. So it really leads to a much more, it's a smoother deal, and it's a more certain process when you put more on the front end.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, the letter of intent, again, critical part of the transaction process.
Call James, he'll make sure that you have a great letter of intent.
And make sure you're doing due diligence with David.